As their communication grew more sophisticated, Young learned about Raisu's world, a crystal planet orbiting a distant star, where beings of living crystal communicated through light and vibration. Raisu, in turn, gained insight into human society, fascinated by the complexity of verbal language and the richness of human emotion. Their sessions often lasted until dawn, with Young pushing the boundaries of their communication system, while Raisu shared knowledge of crystal technologies far beyond human understanding. The laboratory became a bridge between their worlds, a place where touch could reveal the invisible and light could carry the weight of words. By the end of their first month together, they had developed a communication system that combined touch, light, emotion, and scientific measurement. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed for the sharing of complex ideas and feelings between two beings who had seemed impossibly different at first meeting. What started as a chance encounter had evolved into a partnership that promised to change both their worlds. Each new discovery brought them closer to understanding not just each other, but the fundamental connections between all living things, whether made of flesh or crystal. Agent Tahoe stared at the energy readings on his monitor, his forehead creased with concern. The quantum physics laboratory on the outskirts of Seoul had been showing increasingly strange patterns over the past month. As the head of the government's Special Scientific Phenomena Division, anything unusual caught his attention. "These signatures don't match any known energy patterns," he muttered, scrolling through weeks of data. The spikes occurred mainly at night, when only one scientist was logged in the building, Dr. Young. The readings suggested advanced technology far beyond current capabilities, or something entirely unknown to science. Young noticed the increased surveillance almost immediately. Dark vehicles parked near the facility, men in suits watching from a distance, and most concerning, her security clearance being checked more frequently than usual. She knew they couldn't risk discovery, not with what she had learned about Raisu's mission. Late one night, Young carefully packed essential equipment into her car. She had prepared her countryside home, converting the basement into a makeshift laboratory. Raisu followed invisibly, her crystalline form barely disturbing the air as they made their escape. The house sat isolated among rolling hills, surrounded by old pine trees. The basement windows were covered with special films that blocked unusual light emissions. Young had installed signal jammers and electromagnetic shields, hoping to hide their continued research from prying eyes. As they settled into their new workspace, Raisu began sharing the truth about her people, the Harry. Through their touch-based communication system, she revealed images of her crystalline world. The colors flowing through her form showed scenes of beautiful crystal cities, but also devastating decay. "Your people are dying," Young asked, her hand pressed against Raisu's surface. The answering patterns were dark and pulsing, colors of grief and urgency. The Harry were facing a crisis. Their crystalline bodies were degrading, becoming brittle and losing their ability to maintain cohesion. Entire communities were literally falling apart, their consciousness fading as their crystal matrices failed. Raisu's mission wasn't just exploration. She was searching for salvation. Meanwhile, Agent Taiho's investigation intensified. The energy signatures had vanished from the laboratory, but similar patterns began appearing in the countryside. He deployed sensor drones and satellite surveillance, trying to pinpoint the source. Young worked tirelessly to understand the connection between human bioelectric fields and the Harry's crystal structure. Every touch seemed to temporarily stabilize Raisu's form, making her stronger and clearer. But the effect was temporary, and they needed a permanent solution to save her species. One evening, as they worked in the basement laboratory, Raisu detected approaching vehicles. Through urgent pulses of red light, she warned Young of multiple human signatures moving toward the house. Taiho's team had finally traced the energy patterns to their location. Young quickly shut down the equipment and activated the emergency protocols she had prepared. The basement lights went dark, and specially designed scramblers began broadcasting false readings to confuse any scanning equipment. The flickering fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the empty laboratory, as Dr. Nayoung adjusted her microscope. At midnight, the quantum physics facility on the outskirts of Seoul was silent except for the gentle hum of equipment. She brushed a strand of dark hair from her face, squinting through her glasses at the strange readings on her instruments. The air temperature had dropped suddenly, creating an unusual pattern of heat signatures on her thermal imaging display. Nayoung frowned, tapping the screen. The equipment was fairly new and shouldn't be malfunctioning. As she stood to check the calibration, a slight shimmer in the air caught her attention. Like heat waves rising from hot pavement, but inside her climate-controlled lab. Unknown to Nayoung, she wasn't alone. Raisu, a crystalline being from a distant star system, had crash-landed in the dense forest behind the facility just hours earlier. Her ship lay hidden under fallen branches and leaves, its crystal matrix hull cracked from the rough entry through Earth's atmosphere. The damage had forced her to seek shelter and materials for repairs. Raisu's species had evolved the remarkable ability to bend light around their crystalline bodies, rendering them virtually invisible. She had never encountered humans before but felt confident in her natural camouflage as she carefully moved through the laboratory. Her footsteps were silent, each movement precisely calculated to minimize disturbance of the air around her. Nayoung walked slowly around her workstation, following the strange distortion with her eyes. The scientist in her knew something was off about the air currents in the room. She checked the ventilation system, but all the vents were functioning normally. The shimmers seemed to move with purpose, avoiding contact with the lab equipment. Raisu approached a storage cabinet containing rare earth elements, materials she needed to repair her ship's crystal matrix. She reached out with a crystalline appendage, her transparent form refracting the fluorescent light in subtle ways. Nayoung's eyes widened as she noticed small objects on a nearby shelf shifting slightly, though nothing visible was touching them. "Hello," Nayoung called out softly, her heart racing, but her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "Is someone there?" Raisu froze. The human's voice was gentle, almost melodic to her crystalline sensory apparatus. She hadn't expected direct communication. On her world, sound waves traveled through their crystal bodies in complex patterns, creating a language of vibrations and light. Human speech was fascinating but alien to her. Nayoung began systematically checking the lab's security sensors. Each one showed subtle anomalies. Minute changes in air pressure, tiny electromagnetic fluctuations, and the persistent thermal irregularity. She started taking readings with various instruments, unknowingly moving closer to where Raisu stood motionless. The crystalline being considered her options. She could attempt to leave, but the human was between her and the exit. Any quick movement might create enough air displacement to reveal her position. She could try to communicate, but her species had no way to produce human speech, or she could wait, hoping the human would eventually leave. Nayoung began methodically mapping the anomalies, creating a three-dimensional model of the disturbances in the lab. As the pattern emerged on her tablet, her eyes grew wide with understanding. The distortions formed a roughly humanoid shape, about 2 meters tall. "You're trying to stay invisible," Nayoung whispered, more to herself than the apparent entity. "But you're affecting the environment in ways you can't hide. The air pressure, the temperature variations, the electromagnetic field disruptions, they all point to something or someone being right there." Raisu was impressed. No species had ever detected her people through scientific observation alone. Most relied on visual information and were easily fooled by their light-bending abilities. This human's methodical approach and understanding of physical laws was unexpected. Without warning, the lab's automatic door locks engaged with a loud click. The facility's security system had finally registered the accumulated anomalies and initiated containment protocols. Warning lights began flashing silently in the hallway. 10 years after their revelation, Nayoung stood with Raisu on a crystal observation platform orbiting Earth. Below them, their world's joint space fleet prepared for its first mission beyond the solar system. Human crew members worked alongside hairy navigators, their complementary abilities making them perfect exploration partners. The Harry no longer needed to hide, and humans no longer needed to fear the unknown. Together, they had built something unprecedented, a true partnership between species that began with a single touch and grew into humanity's first interstellar alliance. As they watched the ships prepare for launch, both beings knew this was just the beginning of their shared journey among the stars, to capture, amplify, and reproduce the stabilizing effect of human bioelectric fields on a massive scale. The technology to do this didn't exist yet. They would have to invent it. As dawn approached, Na-young looked at her friend and research partner. Raisu's crystalline form held steady in the soft morning light, but Na-young could see the signs of degradation advancing. Even with regular human contact, the damage to her matrix was progressing. They were running out of time. The weight of their task pressed heavily on both beings. It wasn't just about scientific discovery anymore. It was about preventing the extinction of a remarkable species. Every failed experiment, every dead end in their research, meant more Harry lost to the crystal degradation. Na-young made a silent promise as she turned back to her work. She would find a way to save Raisu's people, no matter the cost. The answer was there in the intricate dance between human bioelectric fields and crystal matrices. They just had to decode it before it was too late. The basement laboratory hummed with energy as Na-young adjusted the final settings on her bioelectric harmonics device. Weeks of research had led to this moment, a machine that could amplify and reproduce the stabilizing effect of human touch on hairy crystal structures. The breakthrough had come at 3 a.m. on a rainy night. Na-young discovered that specific frequencies in human bioelectric fields created resonance patterns that could repair degrading crystal matrices. By isolating and amplifying these frequencies, she developed a treatment that might save Raisu's entire species. The prototype resembled a large crystalline chamber, built with pieces from Raisu's damaged ship. Inside, carefully calibrated emitters could broadcast stabilized human bioelectric patterns. The first test had shown promising results. Under the chamber's influence, damaged crystal samples had begun to heal themselves. But implementing this treatment on a planetary scale posed an impossible challenge. They couldn't hide something this big. Using the technology would mean revealing the existence of the Harry to humanity, a decision that carried enormous risks. Raisu's form pulsed with conflicting colors as they discussed their options. Her people had hidden for millennia, believing isolation was their only safety. Now their survival depended on trusting another species with their existence. Na-young understood the stakes. Even if we succeed, she explained, touching Raisu's surface to communicate more clearly, we'll need help. We'll need more scientists, more resources, and a way to reach your world. We can't do this alone anymore. Government agent Taiho was still searching for them. His surveillance teams had nearly discovered their location twice in the past week. Time was running out, both for their secrecy and for the Harry's survival. They spent 3 days weighing their options. Raisu shared memories of her people's fears about discovery, while Na-young described humanity's capacity for both great kindness and terrible destruction. Through their touch-based communication, they explored possible futures, trying to find the safest path forward. The decision came after Na-young showed Raisu humanity's history of scientific cooperation. Despite their differences, humans had often united to solve global challenges. Perhaps the Harry's crisis could become another such moment of unity. They began preparing their revelation carefully. Na-young documented everything: the crystal degradation, the healing effect of human bioelectric fields, and the treatment she had developed. She included detailed scans showing the Harry's peaceful nature and advanced technology. Raisu contributed by recording messages in light and color, which Na-young translated into human language. She explained her people's history, their crisis, and their hope for cooperation with humanity. The beauty of her crystalline form, captured on video, would be hard for humans to perceive as threatening. The night before they planned to go public, Na-young made one final test of the treatment chamber. Raisu stepped inside, her crystalline form glowing under the influence of the harmonized bioelectric fields. For the first time since her arrival on Earth, her crystal matrix showed signs of true healing, not just temporary stabilization. As they continued their careful exploration of communication, the fear in both beings gradually gave way to fascination. Na-young found herself moving around Raisu, studying how the crystalline form bent light differently from various angles. Each new discovery brought gasps of wonder and rapid notes typed into her tablet. Raisu, in turn, was learning that humans possessed an innate ability to affect her kind through simple touch. Each contact not only disrupted her invisibility, but seemed to strengthen and stabilize her crystal matrix in unexpected ways. It was a discovery that would prove vital to her mission, though she didn't yet know how significant it would become. The red security lights finally stopped flashing, plunging the lab back into its normal fluorescent lighting. In the sudden quiet, Na-young realized she had just made first contact with an alien species, and her touch had literally brought hidden wonders to light. She knew that nothing in her life would ever be the same after this night. As dawn approached, both beings remained in the laboratory, engaged in their careful dance of discovery. Through touch, light, and patience, they were building the foundation of understanding between their species, one shimmer of color at a time. The quiet nights in the laboratory became a sanctuary for learning between two vastly different beings. Na-young had converted part of her lab into a makeshift communication center, with various instruments arranged to study the interactions between human bioelectric fields and Raisu's crystalline structure. Through careful experimentation, they discovered that different emotional states in Na-young created unique patterns in Raisu's crystal matrix. Joy produced rippling waves of golden light, while curiosity manifested as spiraling blue patterns. This breakthrough led to their first real conversation, a dance of touch, emotion, and light that transcended the barriers between their species. Na-young documented everything meticulously. She found that even the slightest changes in her bioelectric field could convey complex meanings through Raisu's crystalline form. By modulating her touch and focusing her thoughts, she learned to speak in a language of light and vibration that Raisu could understand. During one particularly productive session, Na-young made another fascinating discovery. While monitoring the lab's environmental sensors, she noticed that Raisu's presence affected more than just light. The crystalline being created subtle changes in air pressure, electromagnetic fields, and even gravity. These physical properties couldn't be hidden, no matter how perfect the light-bending camouflage. Raisu found this revelation both troubling and fascinating. Her species had always relied on their invisibility for safety, yet here was proof that truly observant beings could detect them through other means. Through their growing communication system, she shared her people's history of hiding, their fears of discovery, and their reasons for remaining unseen. Na-young worked to refine their communication method each day. She developed a system of touch-based patterns, combining different pressure points and emotional states to create a crude but effective vocabulary. Simple concepts could be conveyed through single touches, while complex ideas required sequences of contacts, each producing its own symphony of colors and vibrations. The breakthrough came when Na-young realized that Raisu's crystal structure acted as a natural amplifier for human bioelectric fields. By connecting specialized sensors to her own body, she could project her bioelectric patterns more clearly, allowing for more precise communication. The colors that danced across Raisu's form became sharper, more defined, forming distinct patterns that repeated with specific meanings. They spent hours exploring this new language. Raisu learned that human emotions carried their own unique electromagnetic signatures, which she could read even without physical contact. Na-young discovered that by concentrating on specific thoughts, while touching Raisu's surface, she could create intricate light patterns that told complex stories. The scientist also began to understand the limitations of Raisu's light-bending abilities. Temperature differences could reveal her outline. Air currents moved differently around her crystalline form. Even the subtle gravitational effects of her crystal matrix could be detected with sensitive enough equipment. These discoveries led to improvements in Raisu's camouflage techniques, helping her better understand how to move undetected among humans. Raisu knew she had to make a choice quickly. This human had shown intelligence and curiosity rather than fear. Perhaps direct contact was worth the risk. She slowly moved closer to Nadung, allowing her light-bending field to weaken slightly. The air shimmer intensified, and Naeun gasped as she began to make out a vague crystalline outline in the space before her. The being was beautiful, a complex arrangement of transparent crystal structures that seemed to flow and shift like liquid glass. "You're amazing," Naeun breathed, her scientific mind already racing with questions about the physics involved in such a life form. She reached out slowly, not yet touching the creature, but offering a gesture of peaceful contact. In that moment, both beings stood on the precipice of a discovery that would change their worlds forever. Neither knew that this chance encounter in a quiet laboratory would lead to the greatest breakthrough in human-alien relations. They were just two curious beings, one flesh and one crystal, about to bridge the gap between their species for the first time. The quiet laboratory hummed with tension as Naeun reached for her measuring equipment. Her hand moved through the air where the strange distortions were strongest, and then it happened. Her fingers brushed against something solid. The surface felt smooth and cool, like touching the finest crystal. Suddenly, the air erupted in colors. Waves of iridescent light rippled outward from the point of contact, revealing a towering crystalline form. Blues, purples, and greens danced across transparent facets, each pulse of color revealing more of Raisu's true shape. The being's body was a masterpiece of geometric patterns, each section flowing seamlessly into the next like liquid diamond. Naeun stumbled backward, her hand pressed to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Her heart pounded, but her eyes remained fixed on the mesmerizing display before her. The creature's form seemed to shift and flow, yet maintained its overall humanoid shape. Where there should have been a face, a complex array of crystal structures caught and refracted the laboratory's harsh lighting. Raisu, too, remained frozen, experiencing something unprecedented. Never had contact with another species triggered such a response in her crystalline matrix. The human's touch had somehow disrupted her light-bending abilities, forcing her true form to become visible. More alarming was the pleasant tingling sensation that spread from the point of contact, a feeling of warmth and stability she had never known. The security lights continued their silent warning, casting red pulses across the room that made Raisu's body sparkle like a prism. Naeun found her voice first, speaking softly as if afraid to break the moment. "I won't hurt you. I'm a scientist. I want to understand." Raisu's form rippled in response, creating cascading patterns of light that danced across the laboratory walls. She couldn't speak in human language, but she could communicate through movement and light. She slowly extended one crystalline appendage toward Naeun, offering a deliberate invitation for contact. Naeun hesitated only briefly before reaching out again. This time, when her fingers touched the crystal surface, she was prepared for the display of colors. What she hadn't expected was the sensation of gentle vibrations passing through her hand, creating patterns that somehow felt meaningful. The scientist in her immediately began analyzing the experience. The vibrations seemed to follow specific sequences, like a form of language transmitted through touch. She pressed her palm flat against Raisu's surface, and the patterns became clearer. Each pulse of light corresponded to a specific vibration frequency. "You're trying to communicate," Naeun whispered, her eyes wide with understanding. She began tapping different patterns on the crystal surface, watching how the colors changed in response. Each tap created new ripples of light, some bright and rapid, others slow and deep. Raisu marveled at the human's quick comprehension. The touch-based communication was crude compared to her species' normal methods, but it was working. Through patterns of light and vibration, she began conveying basic concepts: peace, curiosity, need for help. The laboratory's instruments were going wild, recording unprecedented readings of energy fluctuations and light patterns. Naeun glanced at the displays, her scientific mind already cataloging the impossible physics she was witnessing. The being before her defied everything. She thought she knew about the properties of light and crystal structures. As flashlight beams swept across the windows above, Rai-Su pressed close to Ne-young, sharing memories of her dying world through their touch-based connection. The message was clear. They needed more time. The fate of an entire species might depend on their ability to evade detection and continue their research. The night became a tense waiting game. Government agents searched the perimeter while Ne-young and Rai-Su remained motionless in the darkness. Every flash of light, every footstep above them, brought the risk of discovery closer. Yet in those quiet moments of hiding, their bond grew stronger. Ne-young understood that she wasn't just protecting a fascinating scientific discovery. She was helping to save a remarkable species that had reached across the stars seeking help. As dawn approached and the agents finally withdrew, Ne-young and Rai-Su knew their time was limited. They would need to work faster, understand more, and find a way to save the Harry before Taiho's investigation caught up with them. The fate of an entire crystalline civilization now rested in their hands. In the dimly lit basement laboratory, Ne-young hunched over her microscope, studying a small crystal sample from Rai-Su's form. The revelation struck her like lightning. The crystal structure wasn't just degrading, it was unraveling at its most fundamental level. Each cell-like crystal matrix showed signs of destabilization, similar to how human DNA might break down under extreme radiation. Through their touch-based communication, Rai-Su shared visions of her dying world. The Harry's crystal cities, once gleaming with internal light, were growing dim. Their inhabitants' bodies were slowly losing cohesion, becoming brittle and fragmented. Young Harry were born with weaker structures, their light-bending abilities barely functional. Ne-young's hand rested on Rai-Su's surface, watching the familiar ripple of colors that indicated their connection. But this time, she focused on the molecular changes happening beneath her touch. Her scientific instruments revealed something extraordinary. Human bioelectric fields weren't just interacting with the crystal structure, they were temporarily realigning it. "Your people didn't send an explorer," Ne-young whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. "They sent their last hope." The patterns flowing through Rai-Su's form turned deep blue, their shared signal for truth. Working through the night, Ne-young mapped the exact changes that occurred when she touched Rai-Su's crystal matrix. Her bioelectric field seemed to provide a template, a stabilizing force that reminded the crystals how to maintain their proper structure. But the effect faded hours after contact, leaving Rai-Su's form slightly weaker each time. The Harry had discovered Earth through their long-range sensors, detecting the unique bioelectric signatures of human life. They had chosen Rai-Su, one of their strongest remaining scientists, to make the journey. Her mission wasn't just to study humans. It was to find a way to save her entire species from extinction. Ne-young's laboratory equipment recorded every interaction, building a growing database of how human contact affected the crystal degradation. She noticed that stronger emotions created more stable patterns in Rai-Su's structure. Fear caused chaotic disruptions, while calm focus produced the most lasting improvements. As they worked, Rai-Su shared more about her world's decline. The crystal degradation had begun generations ago, so slowly it was almost imperceptible. By the time the Harry understood what was happening, entire communities had begun to fade. Their scientists had tried everything, but nothing could stop the inevitable breakdown of their crystalline forms. The basement laboratory became filled with charts and readings, each documenting the complex interaction between human bioelectric fields and Harry crystal structures. Ne-young worked until her eyes burned, knowing that somewhere in this data lay the key to saving an entire civilization. One particularly exhausting night, as Ne-young rested her head against Rai-Su's cool surface, she noticed something new. The stabilizing effect seemed stronger when she was tired, when her body's natural electrical field was operating at its most basic level. This observation led to a breakthrough in understanding how human bioelectric patterns could be used to repair crystal degradation. But the solution wasn't simple. They would need more than just occasional human contact to save the Harry. As they continued their careful exploration of communication, the fear in both beings gradually gave way to fascination. Na-young found herself moving around Raisu, studying how the crystalline form bent light differently from various angles. Each new discovery brought gasps of wonder and rapid notes typed into her tablet. Raisu, in turn, was learning that humans possessed an innate ability to affect her kind through simple touch. Each contact not only disrupted her invisibility, but seemed to strengthen and stabilize her crystal matrix in unexpected ways. It was a discovery that would prove vital to her mission, though she didn't yet know how significant it would become. The red security lights finally stopped flashing, plunging the lab back into its normal fluorescent lighting. In the sudden quiet, Na-young realized she had just made first contact with an alien species, and her touch had literally brought hidden wonders to light. She knew that nothing in her life would ever be the same after this night. As dawn approached, both beings remained in the laboratory, engaged in their careful dance of discovery. Through touch, light, and patience, they were building the foundation of understanding between their species, one shimmer of color at a time. The quiet nights in the laboratory became a sanctuary for learning between two vastly different beings. Na-young had converted part of her lab into a makeshift communication center, with various instruments arranged to study the interactions between human bioelectric fields and Raisu's crystalline structure. Through careful experimentation, they discovered that different emotional states in Na-young created unique patterns in Raisu's crystal matrix. Joy produced rippling waves of golden light, while curiosity manifested as spiraling blue patterns. This breakthrough led to their first real conversation, a dance of touch, emotion, and light that transcended the barriers between their species. Na-young documented everything meticulously. She found that even the slightest changes in her bioelectric field could convey complex meanings through Raisu's crystalline form. By modulating her touch and focusing her thoughts, she learned to speak in a language of light and vibration that Raisu could understand. During one particularly productive session, Na-young made another fascinating discovery. While monitoring the lab's environmental sensors, she noticed that Raisu's presence affected more than just light. The crystalline being created subtle changes in air pressure, electromagnetic fields, and even gravity. These physical properties couldn't be hidden, no matter how perfect the light-bending camouflage. Raisu found this revelation both troubling and fascinating. Her species had always relied on their invisibility for safety, yet here was proof that truly observant beings could detect them through other means. Through their growing communication system, she shared her people's history of hiding, their fears of discovery, and their reasons for remaining unseen. Na-young worked to refine their communication method each day. She developed a system of touch-based patterns, combining different pressure points and emotional states to create a crude but effective vocabulary. Simple concepts could be conveyed through single touches, while complex ideas required sequences of contacts, each producing its own symphony of colors and vibrations. The breakthrough came when Na-young realized that Raisu's crystal structure acted as a natural amplifier for human bioelectric fields. By connecting specialized sensors to her own body, she could project her bioelectric patterns more clearly, allowing for more precise communication. The colors that danced across Raisu's form became sharper, more defined, forming distinct patterns that repeated with specific meanings. They spent hours exploring this new language. Raisu learned that human emotions carried their own unique electromagnetic signatures, which she could read even without physical contact. Na-young discovered that by concentrating on specific thoughts, while touching Raisu's surface, she could create intricate light patterns that told complex stories. The scientist also began to understand the limitations of Raisu's light-bending abilities. Temperature differences could reveal her outline. Air currents moved differently around her crystalline form. Even the subtle gravitational effects of her crystal matrix could be detected with sensitive enough equipment. These discoveries led to improvements in Raisu's camouflage techniques, helping her better understand how to move undetected among humans. They needed a way. As dawn approached, they prepared to face the world. Ne Young would contact trusted colleagues first, then scientific institutions, building a network of support before approaching governments. Ri Su would demonstrate her people's abilities and peaceful intentions, showing humanity the wonders that cooperation could achieve. They knew the path ahead would be challenging. Fear, doubt, and suspicion would be natural human reactions to the Harry's revelation, but they had something powerful on their side: hope. The hope of saving an ancient crystalline civilization, and the hope of humanity reaching out to touch the stars in a way they never had before. Ne Young looked at her friend, watching the colors flow through Raisu's healing form. Together, they had found a way to bridge the gap between their species. Now, they would ask the world to make that same leap of faith, to reach out and touch the unknown with open hands and open hearts. The soft light of morning began to filter through the basement windows. It was time to share their discovery with the world. Time to trust that humanity, when presented with the chance to save another species, would choose hope over fear, friendship over isolation, and the hard path of cooperation over the familiar comfort of solitude. The news broke on a quiet Sunday morning. Humanity was not alone. From a small laboratory in South Korea, Ne Young and Ri Su revealed their story to the world. The initial reaction was exactly what they had expected: fear, disbelief, and chaos. Military forces surrounded the laboratory within hours. News helicopters hovered overhead as Ri Su stepped into view, her crystalline form catching sunlight and creating rainbows across the gathered crowd. The sight of her beautiful, transparent body shifting and flowing like liquid diamond turned fear into wonder. Agent Taeho, who had been hunting them for weeks, became their strongest ally. He helped manage the government response, ensuring that scientists rather than soldiers took the lead in first contact protocols. Ne Young's careful documentation and the obvious peaceful nature of the Harry helped ease international tensions. Within months, treatment centers appeared in major cities worldwide. Each one housed Ne Young's bioelectric harmonics chambers, modified and improved by international teams of scientists. The Harry emerged from hiding across the globe, their invisible ships decloaking to reveal magnificent crystal vessels floating above Earth's major cities. The symbiosis between species developed naturally. Humans volunteered to provide bioelectric field donations, a process as simple as spending time near Harry individuals in harmonics chambers. The Harry, in turn, began sharing their advanced understanding of light and energy manipulation. Universities established new departments dedicated to crystal technology. Harry teachers, their forms now stable thanks to regular treatments, demonstrated how to bend light, store energy in crystal matrices, and manipulate electromagnetic fields. Human scientists worked alongside crystalline colleagues, combining Earth's technology with Harry wisdom. The first joint space program launched within a year. Harry ships, powered by crystal engines and guided by human pilots, explored the solar system. Their light-bending technology revolutionized space travel, while human bioelectric fields kept the crystal ships stable and strong. Ne Young and Ri Su traveled the world, sharing their story of first contact. The sight of a human scientist and her crystalline friend working together inspired millions. Children born after first contact grew up seeing shifting crystal forms as normal parts of their lives, while hairy young ones learned to value the stabilizing presence of human companions. The Harry homeworld received its first human visitors 5 years after the revelation. Earth's bioelectric treatment centers had been replicated there, saving countless crystalline lives. The Harry cities regained their former glory, their crystal spires once again glowing with internal light. Trade between worlds flourished. Earth received crystal technology that revolutionized energy production, communication, and environmental protection. The Harry gained not just survival, but a partnership that enriched their ancient culture with new ideas and perspectives. Looking back, Ne Young often thought about that first touch in her dark laboratory. How a simple brush of fingers against crystal had revealed not just an invisible being, but a future no one could have imagined. The alliance between humans and Harry became a model for future first contact protocols, leading with curiosity and compassion rather than fear.